Hello and welcome to 15 Minutes on Smashable Reds. What are Smashable Reds? It's not really an official category in Australia, but it's certainly a style that's evolved over the last few years, and we've got some guests in today to discuss the style. But just as a quick kind of overview, the concept of a Smashable Red is that it's an easy drinking. It's a red wine. You could even view it as sort of a white wine masquerading as a red. It's something you would put in the fridge for a while. It's juicy, it's fresh, but in the end, these wines aren't necessarily simple, but I think it's a really cool evolution in a country where, if you look at the climate, the adaptability and the appropriateness of this style of red wine, which we're seeing in other places in the world, admittedly, you might use the term crushable or poundable or whatever, but in Australia we talk about smashable, and there's it's a really booming kind of style of red wine that I think actually, honestly, I think when people tire of rosé, which I hope never happens, but this could be a next stepping stone. Easy drinking reds, but with a bit of serious wine-like quality. So my guests for this particular session are Brendan and Laura Carter from Unico Zelo in Australia. They are beaming in live from Adelaide, and we've got Aaron Meeker from here in the United States from Vine Street Imports. They are coming up now. Welcome. Good morning, Adelaide. Good morning, Brendan and Laura.
Cheers, mate. How are you?
Very good, very good. And good evening, Aaron Meeker from New York City.
Philadelphia. But
you're in Philly now, right? My apologies.
Yeah, back in Philly now.
Great. Well, thrilled to have you guys here. I would love to hear from both of you. We'll start with both you, Brendan and Laura. Talk us through your making some of these styles. It's not really a category, but talk about sort of why these, what this style means or what it is, and possibly how it sort of evolved. Where did this come from in Australia?
Did you want to take this one?
Yeah, I think our introduction to this style of wine was when we started working with Neradavla. And we're seeing this style more in Australia from, I guess, more underdog regions. So regions that have previously not necessarily been internationally recognised. And now there's a lot of alternative varieties being planted in these regions. They tend to be a little bit warmer and quite sandy soil. So we're finding wine styles that are a little bit lighter bodied, lower tannin. We can pick them with lower alcohols. And the resultant wine is this concept of being smashable, really crunchy acidity, and can be drunk a little bit younger than some more classic styles.
I think it's also like there are wine styles like Barolo, for example, that are utterly smashable in Barolo because they make sense with the food, the locality, where it grows. We are one gigantic, big, old, salty island, and it makes complete and utter sense that we would be crafting wines that actually we want to enjoy in Australia, in a place where 98% of our populace lives by the sea and 2% lives in a rainforest or a desert. Naturally, we're going to be gravitating towards red wines that have, high acidity, lifted aromatics, not a lot of mid-palate fleshiness. We're really just talking about something that is just lean and cleansing.
Yeah, it's awesome. And it's actually Steve Pannell said something to me. Steve's one of those annoying guys that says all those things you wish you'd said. But he just said, look where we live, look how we live. There's a period of time during the year where I want a full-bodied red wine, but I don't always want to reach for that. In the same way, we don't always reach for Chateauneuf du Pape or Priorat or something. On the daily basis, that sort of juicy, fresh red is so appropriate. But we're going to get back to the making of it because you guys are obviously pretty key for that discussion. But Aaron, you've been with Vine Street Imports for over 10 years now, and you were kind of the early adopters as an importer. You were bringing in some of these styles, maybe by accident, maybe by decision, maybe by choice. But how do you define that sort of style? Like, what's your impression of it?
I echo a lot of what was just said, and when we first kind of saw it, it was in many ways we thought we were either the smartest people or the dumbest people in the room, because at that time, as you said, nobody else was selling styles of wines like that. And I'll never forget when Ronnie and I went to Rootstock the first year, which was the first year Rootstock existed in Sydney. Seeing that style of wine there was something that was just it was an eye-opening experience, I think, for all of us. And as you mentioned the quote from Steve, it just makes sense. It's like, I'll never forget how hot that room was, for one. Like, nothing's worse than walking around tasting natural wine, tasting red wine when it's 100 degrees outside. And I don't know what the hell that is in Celsius, but it's a lot. And
mid-30s.
like, for us, like that was kind of like a wow, okay, epiphany. And then, you know, the first time we tasted Unico Zelo, when we worked with you know, Yama and Lucy Margot and the late Paris, like those, like everyone kind of gravitated toward that style. And I just think we were kind of along for the ride in many ways.
Ah, that's cool. Well, talk about the sort of appreciation for them in the different marketplaces, but let's have a quick look at making them, because we were discussing prior to the start of this. It's easy to make, I don't know, carbonically macerated, simple, easy drinking wines, or on the other hand, a full-bodied, soft, ripe, maybe a red wine with a little bit of residual sugar. It's easy to make that solid, but that's not really where these wines fit in. So look, I'm looking at your wine here, which I just love, the Fresh AF. I've got it the wrong thing. Fresh AF. It's 70% Nero and 30% Zabibo or Muscat. So making them, when you're making them though, the thing that I've found so appealing about this style is that it's not just simple and fresh. It's beautifully forward and fresh, but there's I call it the vinous quality. I call it a bit of a seriousness, so that it still tastes like wine. It's not just like fruit juice. What are you doing, Laura, being the primary winemaker? What are you doing? How do you capture that? What is it that you're doing?
Well, a lot of it is to do with picking time. So we are picking a little bit earlier than maybe we would pick something like Shiraz or Cabernet. So these varieties that are better suited to hot climates, you can pick them when the acidity is still really fresh and the alcohol is lower. So you naturally get this wine that's quite drinkable. And then just not doing too much in the winery. Like if you get things right in the vineyard, I know everyone says this, but it really is true. If you get things right in the vineyard, you pick at the right time, the job as the winemaker is so much easier. So there's really not a lot of additional handling that needs to go on with the wine. We're also not using any oak, and we'll harvest in April and release it before Christmas. So it is it's a youthful style of wine, and that's what we wanted, because the climate in Australia lends itself to drinking wines like that. But it really is about just being a bit more hands off and making sure that the variety that you're growing matches the region. If you can do that, you get the balance so much better, and the resultant wine is fresh and lively.
So actually mimicking what Aaron was just saying about the natural wine movement, that was such a huge thing for just the Australian wine scene in general, and obviously it's gone completely global. And we were at the time just starting up Unico, and we were looking at ways that we could make natural winemaking a lot easier. One of those funny things that Laura was just saying about, you get it right in the vineyard, you can nail it in the winery. It really is quite true. If you can harvest a grape variety at full phenolic ripeness with an ideal pH of, not to get too nerdy, but you really want to be sitting at 3.2 to 3.6. It's really hard to do with grape varieties that are heavily irrigated. So you start to sort of place boundaries on your viticulture, which actually ends up, if you're willing to jump the boundaries of going to a different grape variety that's more suited to an area, you can actually make things like natural winemaking almost happenstance, not a dogmatic philosophy that you prescribe to.
Yeah, that's a brilliant point, and I think it's cool, because when I look at this wine and some other wines that we're seeing on the marketplace here in the US, Riverland is starting to feature prominently. And if you think back to the old history of what Riverland was, beautiful region. I've always loved visiting there, but this was the engine room of Australian wine, the fighting varietals, the stuff that if you wanted a $10 bottle of Chardonnay, that's where you went. But then you go visit and you realize, hang on, what's the sneaky thing in the background here? Are varieties like Zabiba, that's been there for a long time, or Muscat, but also Nero is killing it there. And you said something about just, the viticulture there. It's beautifully suited to these varieties that hold their acidity and freshness in warmer zones. And I love that. I think it's an exciting element.
Not the first time as well that a region has reinvented itself, and in very similar circumstances. You can look at Sicily, you can look at Swartland in South Africa, you can look at Languedoc-Roussillon. That is our Riverland. Yeah,
it's perfect. Now, on that subject, varieties, do you think, because there's a lot of some of these styles, it almost doesn't matter what the variety is. Do you think that matters what the variety is? Do you think that's an important thing? Do you think, or has there been an evolution swaying and toing and froing with that? Or
it definitely matters what the variety is. Yeah. Look, the style, if you categorize the style around flavors, then, and you're gunning for something that's confected, then we're going to be playing in that world of Grenache and Gamay. But the reality is you can make really lively, smashable wines out of even richer, denser varieties. We've seen amazing things from Touriga. We've seen amazing things from Saperavi. It's about natural acidity that is born from the ability to grow something in balance with its site. And I think that's probably the variety is just as important as the site, but the variety is merely the lens that we're seeing the site through.
So classic old school look at terroir, but just with a lighter in a lighter framework. I love it. Awesome.
Yeah. I remember hearing go ahead.
So go ahead, Laura.
You want to make sure that the wine still tastes varietal, and that has been an evolution over the last sort of 6 or 7 years in Australia, that this category has gone kind of to one extreme. So a lot of maybe almost picked too early and really high acid reds, to now people finding a bit more balance between varietal expression and stylistic expression.
Yeah, it's not all about bubblegum.
No. Sorry, Aaron, what were you going to say?
No, I was just, I remember something that Terrace Akota told me years ago, that when he came up via winemaking, and Terrace worked for many large, very commercial standard wineries.
He was the Hardy's of a
He was, and I think in many ways that's what made him the great winemaker he was having that kind of large foundation. But he said something that when he was going through uni, that they were literally taught that flavor didn't exist until you reach 14.5 to 15% alcohol. And it's like, wow, how the world has changed. And, his wines were the early ones for me, at least, that were like, wow, like Grenache. I've never had Grenache that still tasted like Grenache and was delicious, and it was 12.8% alcohol. And yes, you could smash it, but it by no means detracted from the seriousness of that wine as well.
Yeah, no, and I think that's where the charm lies, is that there's, like I said, there's so many fruity confected wines from around the globe, including parts of Australia, frankly. But the reality is, this style is, man, you just want to keep going back. And I've given this to all sorts of people not in the wine business, because they're always like, my daughter is my sort of canary in the sort of, the millennial coal mine, if you like. And I just, here, taste this. Or my friends, like a guy I work with at the gym, he's like, here, try this. And they're like, damn, that disappeared really quick. And there you go. That's the measure of an interesting, fun wine, is you're drinking. It's like, how did that disappear so quickly? And I think of all the styles of wine that we come across, like, man, those bottles, they're just so drinkable and so delicious. Now, tell me about the market right now in Australia for this style of wine. Clearly, it's very popular, but I'm just kind of, is it the young people drinking it? Is it all ages? What's the angle here in Australia for Smashable?
Well, in terms of young people, I think certainly drinkability plays admirability and a blue collar tilt has always been a part of, we're millennials. We started Unico because what we wanted wasn't really being catered for in our budget. So yeah, absolutely. But I would say, in terms of a global perspective, it's all age groups. It's not really an age demographic that are enjoying wines that just are tasty. Maybe someone might enjoy a label more so than another, but at the end of the day, wine is wine, and drinkable wine is drinkable wine.
Yeah, and there's more spread on a wine list now in that red wine category. So going from these more smashable, drinkable reds all the way up to the more serious styles. I don't think that range necessarily existed 5 years ago, but now it's almost critical that you have that range on a wine list here.
Which is awesome. I think that's what makes it interesting, because it's not like it's not just about smashable reds now in Australia. You've got that nice sort of stepping stone and ladders top to something, because I feel like, if you drink wine every day, which sometimes people think that's a problem. I've been doing it for the last 20 years. Yeah, hi, my name's Mark. I drink wine every day. It's like an AA meeting. But the reality is that when you do, I feel like a juice. I mean, think about Beaujolais. The first time you tried good Beaujolais, you're like, hey, that's the kind of stuff that you do reach for on the daily basis, because you can, and you don't always feel like a big concentrated wine. And I think that's what's so beautiful about this. Aaron, selling it in the US, you've been doing it now for pushing 10 years. How's that been working, and who's buying it?
Look, I think like many wine trends, it probably started on the coast. I think the New York, California narrative is a tired one, but it is real. So I don't think we can ignore that. So I think initially that's where a lot of the success was. There were people that were, more interested, and maybe it was that love of Beaujolais. Maybe it was, hey, Lapierre blew my mind, so now what's next? But I remember like when we really shifted our portfolio about 9-10 years ago. At that time, it was very much that proverbial boulder to push uphill of getting people to even recognize or want to have a conversation about Australia. So that was the hardest part. the interesting thing was what caught fire were the wines that were never in the market prior, that were these smashable reds, or maybe some skin contact whites or alternative white varieties, Zabibo and things like that. And I think the past 9 years, the entire wine world has just revolutionized, and now it's by no means set in New York and California. I mean, Mark, you live in Iowa. I go down. I was down south recently, and I was in the godforsaken city of Boston, and seeing how their wine culture has come about. And
careful.
It's so exciting though to see. I mean, the success that we've had in places like Montana and Alabama selling wines in this vein proves that it's not just hipsters and not just young people.
Yeah, I think that's a really important point. The US is complicated, as Brendan and Laura now know. They're selling in the US. It's complicated, but it is also a little gold mine for little pockets of places to where the least expected. Look at Michael Dillon's. He's got a massive following in Tulsa, Oklahoma.
Mm-hmm.
Why? Who knows? It's a funny country. I can walk a mile from my place here to a little wine shop. I can buy through this one guy who obviously I've done some indoctrination. I can buy Clonakilla, Tarasakota's wines. I can buy all sorts of really cool stuff from Australia in this thing. And I'm in Iowa. I'm in the Midwest. So I think it's a complex market. But like you say, I don't think it's skewed towards this style of wine's not appealing just to one sort of demographic. I think it's just tasty, delicious, easy to drink wines that's not much to sort of work through. It's like, wow, this is delicious.
And I also think that from a climate standpoint throughout the U.S., what I've started to see a bit is areas that you would have thought would have gravitated toward these wines quicker, places like Texas and Arizona and Florida and the whole South, in many ways were kind of slower to come around. But now it's caught fire. I mean, I'm doing a dinner next week in Dallas, and the lineup of wines, I mean, there's nothing that's hard to drink, let's put it that way. There's nothing that has a lot of tannin and a lot of extraction in Dallas, Texas.
That's awesome. Brilliant. Well, I'm mindful of the fact this is supposed to be 15 minutes on Smashables. I could talk about this style of wine for a good solid hour, but I appreciate all of your time. I'm hoping things open. It's nice to hear, Aaron, you're out there doing some tastings, moving around. It's slowly happening, slowly but surely. We're getting out there here in the US, hopefully soon in Australia, and hopefully I can get back down there. I need to see some family. Those lovely locked up borders, I get it, but man, I got to get down there. It's important for me.
Lock the borders up within the country as well, like the state borders.
Yeah. It's happened again. But anyway, hopefully we can all enjoy a juicy, fresh, smashable glass of smashable red at some point altogether at some point in the near future. Brendan, Laura, thank you so much for your time. Enjoy the rest of your day. Aaron, down there in the evening in Philadelphia, enjoy the rest of your evening, and thank you all for your time with this. Thank you.
No worries. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Cheers.